I got my paycheck from working. I just worked 80 hours and I got my 2-week paycheck and it's $150. And I'm driving home realizing that that $150, it's not going to pay the bills. And I just kind of get really upset. And I'm like, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to be able to do it. So I call my wife up and I tell her, I said, hey, I think the source is not going to take off. She goes, I just got one question for you. And I said, okay. And she's like, did God call you to fail? And I'm like, huh. That's all she said. Did God call you to fail?
To catch people up, what inspired you to start the Source Spokane originally?
Yeah. Well, at the time, well, first, thanks for having me on. It's good to be here and getting our little word out. So, um, starting back in, I guess it would be 2003, I started a program at the YMCA. I was working with troubled teens, juvenile offenders. Um, and as I was working with the Y, originally my start there was I went to the YMCA. I had a business plan. I said, "Hey, would you guys hire me to work with at-risk youth in our community? Here's my fundraising plan. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Back then, we were mowing lawns to raise money, and the YMCA at the time had a budget for expanding programs for youth, and they had like just this money that was set aside, and they're like, "Hey, that sounds like a good fit." So the YMCA in the Spokane Valley hired me back in 2003 to start working with juvenile offenders, and that's kind of where it started. So and I stayed at the Y, developing youth programs, became a youth program director, started serving kids at 3 different branches, really working closely with juvenile court and juvenile detention, helping kids with community service hours and helping kids that were incarcerated. And in the process, the YMCA, because I started moving up in my responsibilities, I started doing things that were outside of what I thought I should be doing. For instance, I started, becoming the manager on duty, supervising the whole Y, and working in capacity of like, just helping to run the programs abroad. But my heart has always been for teens and always been for at-risk youth. And so as I was moving along, the freedoms I had at the beginning at the Y to develop programming, to create things that are serving troubled teens, started taking a shift. And then I found myself, running a teen center, when working more in the facility model of the YMCA. Well, at that time, I decided that, hey, I saw a huge overlap between kids that were in the court system in trouble with the law, and they were also in foster care. My wife and I had already been foster parents for a while. We had adopted a couple children. Some friends of ours that actually worked here adopted a couple children, Julie Vincent and her husband, Sean. And so this is like 2011, and I just was telling my wife, I'm like, I think it's time, for me to be done. I think I'm willing to start something new. And that was really what started the source, is like the desire to impact kids that have that overlap of no parents and they're in trouble. How can we help them? And so it was 2011. That's when I resigned from the Y and wrote my first little business plan. And then immediately had people coming in to help me. Julie Vincent, who's the vice president here at the Source, her and my wife, because we're trying to figure out how to raise money, we started a furniture store, like a furniture restoration business. The kids from juvenile court and I would go out and collect the furniture, bring it in, and then Julie and Zara's my wife, and Julie's our vice president. They would work with some of the girls that were in trouble with the law, and they would restore furniture. And then we actually were able to turn, we got our first youth staff come on board with the Source. A young man named Amir and a girl named Alicia came in and started. Amir worked with me in the field, and then the girl, Alicia, worked with the girls in the shop restoring furniture. And so really that's where the start from it, came, was like, how can we meet this need that we see in our community of kids going from foster care to juvenile detention to homelessness to adult detention, because that's a very relevant problem in any community across the United States. And so it just really takes people who have the heart to do it, and that's kind of how we got started. So
That's super cool. Um, I didn't realize you guys had a furniture store operation.
Yeah, we did that for a couple years, but once we got the direction to go for residential 24/7 care, we closed it down because we didn't have anybody to run it, and so it's like we have when I opened up the first house, our team opened up the first house. I had like eight people helping me, 8 employees, and it was like 24/7. I was working crazy long hours. Every one of us was serving as much as we could, and we didn't have time to keep the furniture store going. It just kind of shifted directions from, community service-based service with our kids to 24 residential service with kids. So
That's cool. At what point um, did that first home become like financially viable?
that took a bit, because when your business or company is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you have to have revenue to pay all the staff that are working those. And the revenue that we get is contract based, and so the state of Washington DSHS provides money for us to take care of kids that are in foster care, and and it took a while. You have to have a certain amount of youth in your program to be able to break even, and it took a handful of months. And so I worked really, really long hours, and everybody involved was working long hours, and I worked for free for a long time to get it going. So it took probably 4 or 5 months before it was viable.
How long from like say the genesis of the source um, until you had after you the first staff member?
Until I had another staff besides myself.
Yeah.
Well, what's really cool. Let's see. I started my first day, I think, in the source is probably like September 2011 when I actually I am doing this job now, and it was probably, well, the first bit I just sat around like trying to figure out like what am I going to be doing,
Yeah.
trying to figure that part out. What does the business plan look like? What's the what's our market strategy? How are we going to be viable to serve this population group? And I think it was probably the first actually staff that helped me was I worked with an organization that had a program to train youth. It was like a grant program, and it was through Volunteers of America, and they would find youth places to work for not-for-profits, like a job training program through it was called Next Gen Zone. And so through Next Gen Zone, they would pay the staff person, the teenage staff person, to work at a place so they could get job training. And so my first young man that came through that, he worked with me and was paid by Next Gen Zone until I could start paying him, from the money that we were making mowing lawns and things like that and doing landscaping. And so it was a good learning opportunity for him. And then our next person was a young lady named Alicia that came from that same program to work in our furniture store. So those are our
Okay.
first two, part-time employees.
Yeah.
So
So then after that, it was what, a couple months until you got your first home?
no, that was so 2011, and then we were doing that, and then the furniture store opened, I think, in 2013,
Okay.
2012, somewhere in there. I'd have to look back to remember exactly, but we opened up the furniture store, and Julie and Zay were running it, working with Alicia. We had a lot of outside vendors that would help supply items to our store, and it was like a shabby chic furniture restoration store, and so there was like lots of home items in there, and did that for a couple years, and then and so in the process, it was like 2013. I approached Children's Administration and said, "Hey, I'm interested. Like, how can I help foster care kids better?" And the guy working for Children's Administration at the time said, "Well, what you need to do is you need to open up a group home." And I said, "Okay, how do you do that?" And he just handed me a packet of paper and said, "Answer the questions that are in this packet of paper, and that'll be the process to get you licensed to open up a residential care facility for teens." And that was 2013. But that little packet of paper, which is probably like, maybe 15, 20 pages thick, had a lot of requirements that I knew nothing about. A good example would be please show us policy and procedures that provide a wraparound approach to care um, in services for youth. So I didn't even know what a wraparound approach to care meant at the time. And so I had to learn, like, well, what does that mean? So you have to do research to figure out, like, how am I going to answer this? One of the requirements was programs that can really understand Native American law and tribal authority for kids, because there are tribal kids that are in the system. And if we're going to be working with those, we needed to understand the sovereignty of the Native American communities and the Native American tribes in our state. And so I had to learn what policies and procedures look like around that. And so took me a year to write policy. And I brought in people that were far more experienced than I am, that knew that, social workers, licensed counselors, people that had the expertise to really assist me. And the people that, there was a couple of us that were working on it to assist us in getting it to where it needed to be so that it could be viable for contract for licensing.
Yeah. So when you entered that process, like, what, how long did man, the bureaucracy, the paperwork, how long did that take until you had your first home?
Yeah, well, it was a year process. Well, and here's how they do it. So the first time I submitted it, so I put together these big, huge binders. They're like 600 pages long of all of our policies and procedures, how we're answering their questions. And it's kind of stressful because they tell you, like, you have two shots, right? So you're going to submit your first one.
Mm-hmm.
You're guaranteed not to pass. They're gonna red ink it up. There's a review board through the state. They're gonna red ink it up and send it back to you, and you have to make the corrections. And your corrections need to be done correctly. Otherwise, they're not going to give you a third shot. You have one shot, then you get your revision, and after the revision, that's it if you didn't do it correctly. So, and that process took a year. I started on to get that going, and at the same time, I was raising money from people, people that believed in what we were doing, because I needed to get a house. And at that time, the source did not have much income. I had money in savings, which I was living on, and I needed to get a house. So I started searching the community, found a house to rent, needed furniture to set it up, to furnish the home, and people just rallied to help me. They just started bringing stuff in. Tons of people were helping at that time. And so, and then I also, at the same time, I had to get an independent 501c3 license because I was operating under a church at the time. But the contract was requiring me to become fully insured and have our own governing board. And so I had at the same time I was writing articles and bylaws to get a 501c3 organization going. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Dude, that's really cool. What comes to mind, man, what comes to mind for me is the I'm blanking on the address, so don't beat me up, but the scripture, do not grow weary of doing good, for in due season you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. And like, my eyes are glazing over listening to you talk about how much you actually had to endure and not give up. Has there been a moment where you've wanted to give up?
Really, yeah. There's been a handful of them, but I think the key is you have to recognize for all the people here, because we go in these cycles, right? This is a tough job, and I'm not a wussy person. I like hard things. I enjoy challenge. I've been a long distance runner guy, just a mountain climbing guy. I go and do martial arts with kids who beat me up. I just like a challenge. I've always liked that. But one of the things you recognize, if you don't have people that believe in you, it's like, I would have quit, it was like, so this is probably like 2012 or something, like maybe 13. I got my paycheck from working. I just worked 80 hours and I got my 2-week paycheck, and it's $150. And I worked, because back then it was really like as a not-for-profit organization, you can only get paid if you have money, right? Yeah. And so I wasn't that great of a fundraiser. So my payment was $150 for 2 weeks work. And I'm driving home realizing that $150, it's not going to pay the bills.
Yeah.
It's not going to, and so I have people that are encouraging me, cheering me on, but inside I'm in turmoil because I'm like, I got kids at home. I got a house payment that's due. What am I going to do? Just feeling that stress. And I call my wife up and I tell her, well, at the same time, let me back up a tiny bit, because at the same time, one of my friends who is on my board at this, he's like on the advisory board at the source at the time. He knows my financial situation, and he calls me up and he's like, "Hey, there's a job at the YMCA. You can get. It's not my old job. It's a different job. You're going to run the whole facility in the facilities department at the North YMCA. It's yours if you want it." Very tempting, full benefits, decent pay, responsibility, stuff I like, and at the same time I have the $150 paycheck, and I'm looking at this job offer in the car. I'm driving home, and I'm like, and I just kind of get really upset, and I'm like, I'm gonna fail. I'm not gonna be able to do it. So I call my wife up and I tell her, I said, "Hey, I think the source is not gonna take off. I think that I need to take this job at the YMCA." And my wife is she's a very strong woman.
Mm.
And I wouldn't be who I am without her and her support of me, and her not even just her support, because she plays an active part at the source. She's we've adopted 3 children. We have 6 children total. She's a champion. And she says to me, I say, "Hey, I got this $150 paycheck. What do you want me to do?" She goes, "I just got one question for you." And I said, "Okay." And she's like, "Did God call you to fail?" And I'm like, "Huh." That's all she said. "Did God call you to fail?" And I'm like, "All right, good talk." And I call up the guy that's offering me the job at the YMCA, and I'm like, "Hey, bro, thank you for the job offer. I'm going to ride this out. Either it's going to succeed or it's going to crash and burn, and I'll let you know." And so I turned the job down, and it's very interesting how it all worked out, because immediately, I would say that was the lowest paycheck, and after that, they started immediately going up, and I started being able to pay the bills,
Mm.
and people were supporting us, and they were rallying around the cause, and then that launched me right into writing contracts, and so I was writing the contract, and I had income coming in, and it was at that crux moment of me, like, I'm throwing in the towel, I'm giving up, and for the people, my pastor, my board, my advisory board members at the time, my friends, Julie, who's working here now, she was encouraging us. She was doing everything she can to keep the store running, and they're like, "Oh no, we got to do this. We got to do this." And so it takes the weakness out of the equation when you have people who believe in you.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm a bold, gutsy person, but there's moments when you have responsibility of 6 children at home, a mortgage payment that you have to make. It starts weighing on you, right? And so you can feel like you want to quit, but when people tell you, like what my wife said, "Did God call you to fail?" And that I took that to heart, and I'm like, I'm riding this thing out until I hear otherwise. If I hear, "Hey, you can stop now," I'll stop. But until I hear that, I'm going for it. So
That's, dude, I got goosebumps. So today, how many people do you have on staff?
there are, oh man, I don't know the exact number total, because the crazy part is, like, I don't run the show no more. Um, if you ever see a bus that's loaded with people that are going somewhere, you have the bus driver, but then you have different seats in the bus that are important, right? And so in the context of a business, um, I'm a good, visionary, figure out a way to get something started, but I'm a lousy, administrator. I remember our first review, and they came in to look at my papers, right? And you're supposed to be super organized, and I just had like a stack of papers. All the kids are mixed together, and the licensor at the time, he's like, "This is going to need some improvement." And what I realized, I'm like, that was my best effort. I need administrators.
Mm.
I need people who can run the show. And so we have. So back then, I was the everything guy. I was the in staff, the line staff guy, the executive director guy. The only thing I'd never done, I've always had payroll done by someone else, and so in house. Julie's our CFO, and she's always done payroll, so she does all that. I gave her all the bill paying, right? Because I did that at the beginning too. But when you're not that good at administration, you have to recognize you're not that good at it, and put the right people on the bus in the right seats. And so, because back then I was struggling to manage our one house, 12 people. We actually launched our second house, had it for a year, and then we had to back off, go back to one, because the chaos level and the difficulty of trying to manage it all by myself was super hard. But in 2018, I brought on a solid administrator,
Mm.
and then she was done. That's Julie. She was done volunteering and got to a spot where she was actually on staff because she had prior to that had been doing payroll for us, and then, like I said, she ran the furniture store with Zara. Um, but then you start bringing the right people on the bus, and then you can handle a lot more. So right now we have 6 houses plus overseas work, and it's because we have people that are on the bus that are supposed to be there. Our HR department, it's not me. Our administrative department, that's not me either. I have people that are skilled at doing that job. So, which makes it so that the organization can function at a higher level. So,
How many kids are in your program today?
16, I think. It fluctuates a little bit. Let's see, we have four. Let's see. Well, we have a respite program, and so that program is like a 30-day stay for parents with disabled children. And so there's 2 beds there, and then we have like uh, 4 DDA beds, and then 5, 6. I'd say like 14, 15 kids, 24/7. But some of those kids fluctuate, like especially with our DDA program, because we provide respite for high needs disabled children, and parents are we build relationships with families, and then they have this ability to come and get assistance with their medically fragile child, and that program is amazing. And then we're also working on getting that adult home open, so we'll be taking some disabled adults. So, and that'll house probably five more coming up here within the next 3 months, 4 months, something like that.
Wow.
So it'll be up to 20 or so.
Wow. That's super cool. Um, Thank you for sharing all that. Like, let me ask you this. What was your kind of keystone or pivotal moment in all of this where, or maybe it's a particular story, that really shaped your mission early on?
You're gonna get me emotional. I'm gonna just show you something. Now, this is not scripted at all, but I'm gonna pull this out of my corner here. I've always been a person who I just love teens, right? And that's like been the call of my life is to serve teenagers. And so this young lady, I have this little plaque in my office. Her name was Josie, and I was super close to this girl when she was 14, 15, 16. And she passed away, and in 2009, and that was a huge blow to me. And she wasn't the first kid that we lost in the process. When you work with at-risk youth, sometimes bad stuff happens to them. I've had several kids. Now she died of an illness, but some of my kids have, committed suicide, overdosed. When you're working with kids who have volatile life, sometimes they don't make it. And some of those moments. I just look at it and I'm like, this can't be. There's a saying that what does it take for evil to exist? It takes good people to do nothing. And what does it take for these youth to have their lives flushed down the toilet? Well, if they don't have family and they don't have a support system around them, who's going to help them? Who's going to be willing to make a difference in their life? And so, and that's what really the pivotal moment, because when I first took the job working with this, like 2000, I took the job working with the at-risk youth. It wasn't until one of our first tragedies, I was working in Puyallup, and we had a young lady that overdosed, and it bothered me severely, and it bothered my boss at the time severely too, because he was super close to her. And we've seen the loss of life, kids going to long-term incarceration, and the destruction of that human, and the loss of their plan and purpose of their life. And so those are like really the driving factors of the why is I'm here on earth to make an impact. And so many of our team, they recognize that too, that like you're on earth not just to make money and to get your creature comforts of the American dream, but what if your life can be used to impact the lives of others in a positive direction? When all is said and done, we have these spheres of influence, and we're going to live, we're going to die, and usually it only takes like 2 generations, maybe 3, for you to be forgotten. Well, I'd like to have a stamp in the history of time. That's like, okay, I used my life to the best. Like, at first I thought I was being famous, right? When I was a kid, I was like, I want to be an actor, then people will know me. That really has nothing to do with it. But what it does, like the stamp that you make in the history of time is in the lives of other people. And for me, it's in the lives of youth. I've been doing it 30 years now, and I've gone from being the older brother to the dad to now I'm grandpa. It's like crazy. So, but really, I think that that's the driving factor is, can I use my life to impact the life of somebody else? So,
Dude, I think that's a great place to land the plane. Thank you, and let's do this again soon.
yeah. All right.